If you've not been following the series, we're making a really fancy sapele hardwood front door and frame that's going to look like this when it's all done. Up to now, we've been doing a bit of machining, and there's a little bit of machining left to do, which is the draft strip details and like sealing details on all the rebates where the door is going to sit. Now, because I live in the world of truly bespoke joinery, I don't follow kind of a set window and door system where each seal has all been worked out. It goes exactly in this position. I tend to have to take each project on a like day-by-day basis. When you're setting up your draft seals in this seal position here, I would normally groove in this direction and use an Aquamac 21, which is this kind of profile. You'd use like a 2.7mm saw blade, groove it in there, and the foam seal would sit up against that rebate, and that creates a seal that your door shuts into. For this project, because these are such chunky pieces of wood, I prefer to use this style of draft strip, which will groove in the 90 degrees to that previous one, and the groove sits at the bottom of that rebate there. Is going to go in like that. So that's going to be the main seal for the face of my door. Then I add in a second seal in the rebate that will sit in this position, and that obviously interferes with where the hinges run and where the lock is going to run. So for each project, when you're setting your seal position in this rebate, whether you want it further towards the front or further towards the back, is kind of determined by where these lock positions run, because you don't want them to I've had it in the past where I've messed this up and not thought about it. So say your hinge sits in this position here, and you think, oh, I'll groove it somewhere there without thinking about the hinge at this stage. And what you end up with is the edge of the hinge running halfway through where the draft strip runs, and you end up having to cut the draft strip around the hinge or vice versa, and it gets a little bit messy. So at this stage, you want to be definitely sure that wherever you put your groove for this draft strip in the rebate, that it lands sort of into the end of the hinge, or it completely misses it. If you've got really thick doors, you can get away with running down the back of the hinge. So I'm going to purposely go into the hinge. So yeah, hinge position, I've marked my hinge position out there. And the lock for this door is really, really simple. We've just got a 5-lever lock, and then we've got an independent latch plate, and the lock is going right in the middle. So as long as my draft strip meets into the edge of this hinge here, I can set it up in that position and groove them through. To make that cut, I've got a very old 2.7mm saw blade that will basically cut in that position there, deep enough to accept the draft strip. And then I have in the past used this to cut the draft strip that will lie in this position, but for this project, Trend have sent me this demon of a router cutter. It's an absolute monster. And that is a specific router cutter for the Aquamac 21 draft strip, and it will machine sort of like this. And the huge bearing on the top there, guide it to the correct depth, and then this cutter is all set up to perfectly suit that draft strip, and just set the height off the router. I like this one because you can sort of climb cut it using the router along the face to get a sort of nice clean cut, and then take the bolt back out using the bearing, nice and controlled. And it's great for rebates like this where you need to stop and start, because it turns into a moulding at a joint. So bearing on a router is a much better way of doing it than on the spindle moulder, but both ways are possible. Routering doesn't really get much smoother than that bit. That is beautiful. So do that at the jambs as well. Where it can get tricky is where multi-point locks are involved, so that draft strip might run in line with where the multi-point lock is running. It affects all the detail at the bottom where you rebate the door over your weather bar or sill or whatever's happening at the bottom. So ideally you want the perfect drawing of all the interactions on all the different faces and corners. Then you can get this draft strip where it sits right out the way. But basically with this one, where this draft strip's going to run we're going to have a stainless steel weather bar, and the draft seal at the bottom of the door is going to interact with the one up the side, run in line with it, and create a nice perimeter seal so we don't get nasty drafts in the corners of the door. And to show you, the door will sit something like that when it's closed. That one's a wiping seal. This is a 190mm saw blade, and it can just about groove a rebate 65mm deep if you're using the other draft strip method, so the Aquamac 21, or using like a slimmed down spacer. George made this for me, and it just about gives you enough depth to the teeth that it cuts sort of 75mm from the face of the bit of wood. If you imagine you wanted a groove in here to suit the draft strip, run your timber in this direction, it'll just about cut a 65mm rebate, just cutting in enough to do the draft strip. And I actually found a big spacer like that sits well over the shaft holds the blade flatter and truer on the spindle than if it's sort of sitting right near the top on lots of little like thin spacers like that. You don't get as truer sort of clamping pressure on the blade, so it actually improves the quality of the cuts having a nice long spacer either side, sort of like an inch run underneath, one of them on top makes this sort of run a lot truer. Like that. I'm actually going to try the Deventer draft strip that looks like this in this door frame, but I'm going to give myself a backup option of my standard draft strip because it doesn't matter, because the groove will be covered by this one, so I can put either Aquamac or Deventer draft strips in this frame. So I can use that one grooved in like that, which is my sort of standard draft strip. Or I can use either of these Deventer profiles. That's more of a casement window draft strip that will sit in like that. Or the door one here will sit in like that. Right, so that is pretty much all my machining done for the frame. So I've just got to start working on the joints. Before I do that, I'm going to sand this little interaction between the two. There's a little bit of like a lip or a discrepancy on the fit. So I'm just going to run some sandpaper over that. And while I'm there, take any ripples out of these big mouldings so you can see the little ripples. So I'm just going to get rid of them as much as possible. It won't be my final sand because I'll do that once I've sort of chopped everything in, and I'll remove all my pencil marks with a final sand. But I can't really scribe them in with that lip in place because it'll affect the fit of the scribe. I have just decided to add a bit of an extra detail where this bottom panel is. So this is the outside jamb, so you've got the glazed side panel from here to here, and then this is where the bottom panel of the frame is going to go. So that particular one is this one here, so from there to there. I'm going to make that panel thicker and heavily insulated, so it's probably going to be sort of 60-70mm thick as a panel, which isn't what I initially planned to do. So I can do it, I've just got to deepen these rebates to accommodate the thicker panel before the bead, and it'll give a nice sort of difference in the alignment of where the panel is to where the glass is through this middle rail, which will look really nice. But what I've not done is set these tenons back, because I was just going to initially do the same width piece of glass as a panel. I've not set these tenons back, which is what I would need to do if I'm taking that out of there. So I think what I'm going to do for this one is assemble it as I've made it, and then run the route around once it's been assembled, just to deepen that rebate. So I'll use a top bearing flush trim router cutter and trim this bit of material out to the depth that I need with that router cutter once it's all assembled, and that will give me sort of a bit of end grain showing on this tenon once it's in here. But it's inside a panel, and it's not the end of the world, but it's just a small thing that I wish I could have avoided. So that's slightly annoying, but I can make it work and it'll be absolutely fine. This is one of the pads from the LS 130 set, and it's utterly perfect for that radius of curve. Couldn't make it up. And these are quite good, so you can squish them round a profile like that. Make it pretty seamless with very little effort. So there we go, they're all sanded and moulded in. I'll sand these inside edges and the rebates of the door opening with the belt sander when I get round to it. So in order to scribe these mouldings over the counterpart that it's going into, that it's tenoned into, sort of like so, I need to create from this corner here a 45-degree cut through this moulding. I think I'm going to set up on the crosscut and do them on there using a 45-degree board, and I can put my pieces in, just pull the crosscut saw over. I have got this piece of aluminium that's for a bit more of a hand technique, and I'm going to get George or cut it on my Capex off at 45. Thank God that's over. But what that gives you is this perfect square that you can go clamp on. It lines up with that position there. And then you can rest your chisel on this face and just scribe. It's the perfect guide for your chisel on the 45-degree plane. I've just drawn a 45-degree line down from this edge here. 45 degree is the magic number for a 90-degree corner. We'll get that mounted on the saw. So yeah, there we go. Got a nice little 45-degree cut right on the corner of that line there, all the way through that moulding to the tenon. And that section there, that cross-section line that 45-degree angle gives us, is what we have to scribe down to make the scribe over the tenon. And obviously the front part here, because it goes then back on itself, this section at the front has to be a true mitre, and then we can scribe from here sort of back. But I'll go through that in tomorrow's video, so make sure you check back in, and I hope you enjoyed this one. Let me know how the videos are turning out, because I'm just sort of filming them quite quickly while I'm working. I'm under a bit of a time constraint, so not spending a lot of time thinking about the video, concentrating on what I'm doing, but trying to keep it fly on the wall throughout the whole process. So let me know your feedback.